right, welcome everybody to episode 20 of the Content Lab podcast. Today we're joined by Eric Greenhalgh. Eric's a photographer, affiliate owner, husband, and father of three kids. He has worked with some of the most recognized names in the fitness industry, including Loud and Life, Concept 2, bunch of different brands, Two Put, you name it. But most importantly, he's worked a lot in the past couple of years with CrossFit. And in the past couple of years, Erica has the opportunity to shoot specifically for Dave Castro for his Instagram feed, which is pretty cool. We'll talk more about that. In addition to that, he's been shooting as a content creator for 18 years and about 8 years of CrossFit. So a lot
Yes,
of
sir.
experience. Eric, well, first of all, we have a co-host, another Eric from Arizona
Yes.
as well. So Eric Castaños, thanks for joining us today, Eric, as a co-host, and Eric Greenhalgh, thank you so much for being on the pod, man.
Yeah, we're doubling up the Erics today.
Yeah, from Arizona.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
definitely the better Eric of the two.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, we were talking before we started, and it's funny because most people are actually going to hear my name for the first time because most of the time when I go to events, they're like, Imam, like that's all they know me by. So, and I don't,
Yeah.
it's my fault because even on my Instagram, I think I don't even have my name on there. So yeah, my name's Eric, but most people know me as Imam.
Ain't it funny how nowadays it's very common just to call people by their IG names? Like you don't
Oh
even
yeah.
know
In
their
fact,
real names.
half the time I don't even remember like what people's names are. I'm just like, oh, it's this on their Instagram feed. So yeah, it's normal.
I was checking yesterday. I'm like, because I kind of knew your last name, but I was like, oh, I'm gonna double check. I went to your Instagram. I'm like, he doesn't even have his name on his Instagram.
Yeah.
I almost went back to like the emails with TFX to see if you have like
Oh
your.
yeah.
But I was like,
The full name.
I'm just gonna text him.
Dude, Carlos
Uh,
does his research.
Yeah, I have to do my research.
Well, and then the last name throws everybody off anyway. that silent GH on the end, they're always just like, what the hell is that? So yeah.
It's fancy.
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna call Castaños and Imam for the podcast. That way we don't get too confused.
Yeah, we
That's
don't want to go
perfect.
dubs, Eric.
All right, so Imam, let's get started. Let's talk about you. Tell me about your life growing up, where you're from, and how you found photography. So just talk about all that.
I was born and raised in Arizona. I've lived here my whole life. I always told myself as a kid that I was going to find some way to get out of here. And then somehow I just kept putting down roots. And so it just kind of like I've never left. But it's funny because now that I've traveled to a lot of different states in the US and other stuff like that, I have no interest in really moving out or leaving. There's probably like 2 states in the country that I would like pick up and move for. One's probably Colorado and the other's Tennessee.
No Florida?
Other than that, no Florida.
No Florida, bro.
Yeah,
don't even try
it. Something about like 90 degrees and 90% humidity. Like I'll take 110 with no humidity all day long. Dry heat, but
yeah.
And then as far as photography, professionally, I didn't start till just after high school, but I always had an interest in photography. I remember even as a kid, we would go on vacations and my dad had like an old Canon AE1, which is like 35 millimeter film camera. And I don't remember ever being like introduced to it or anything like that. But I just remember like I would see it and I would just go grab it like when we're on vacations and I would just like go photograph whatever the heck I could think of. But it's funny because I'm sure my dad got mad because I had no idea what I was doing, right? Like, and back then it was like everything was manual. You had to like, dial it all in and use the light meter inside and all this other stuff. And I didn't know any of that. So I bet you anything, if you went back and looked at all the film from our family vacations, any of the ones that were like hot garbage were probably from me because I had no idea what I was doing. And then high school, I took a photography class my junior year of high school, and that was like still back in the black and white days. So, dark room, processing everything with chemicals. There was no such thing as a digital camera back then. There was, but they were like, archaic, and they took like 2 megapixel photos. So all of that kind of like came to be afterwards. So I just never stopped from that point on. So a couple of years outside of high school, when I went to college, I actually made that my major. So I majored in photography, but never finished. I was a couple of years in, and at that point I had started, I was an assistant for another photographer who was into weddings. and I assisted for him for a couple years just to get my feet wet. Because in high school and college, I had no interest in having people in my photographs. It was all about art, right? Like still life, landscapes, whatever, stuff like that. And then once I was working with this guy in the wedding industry, I realized that you could tell stories while also creating cool things, right? So people kind of made the story as opposed to just me trying to create something with an object or a landscape. So I kind of fell in love with that concept by shooting weddings. So I did weddings for almost 14 years before I ever looked into like either the fitness space or sports or anything like that in general.
And that was, how old were you? Like 20?
When I started in the
when
wedding
you started
industry?
doing weddings, yeah.
Yeah, about 20, 21.
Wow, 14 years? I had no idea.
Yeah, I'm old.
Hey, you're my Mohawk brother, you know, like we both have pretty
Well,
much the same haircut.
I had to do this so that I could, you know, fake people into believing that that I wasn't that old.
Yeah.
So because like if I let this grow out, it's all gray. So
you rock the salt and pepper well, dude.
You
Yeah,
started
they're
the
good.
weddings in the weddings industry. Was that like your main focus for all those 14 years, or you kind of like dabble into like different stuff? Any type of fitness related stuff at all?
I don't think I photographed one fitness thing until I got into CrossFit myself. Like everything on my radar was weddings, you know, family photos, senior portraits, anything that was just kind of more of that portrait type thing. And I mean, weddings are events, so like obviously that's like an event type structure, but yeah, definitely no sports or anything like that. That's the lie. I did one son's basketball game as an assistant, but other than that, that was it. Yeah.
Nice. And you found CrossFit first as a sport, and then you kind of like started like dabbling into using your photography skills into the sport. Tell me a whole story, because you're an affiliate owner too. So obviously like you're very involved into now like the community and the industry and all that. So tell me a story from you finding CrossFit and kind of being like, okay, I'm going to start taking photos as well.
Yeah, I found CrossFit. It's probably getting close to about 10 years now. A friend of mine was training people out of his garage, and then he was actually like starting his own space. Like he was, you know, they got a building, and he needed some help with some setting up like all the audio equipment. And so I went over there to like help, and he was like, hey, just get like a couple months for free. Like, you know, it was kind of like a trade situation where he's like, oh, thanks for helping, just come train. And at that point, like I was like the normal gym goer, like LA Fitness or whatever, you know, 3 days a week, nothing but chest and tries and back and buys and whatever. But
hell yeah, brother.
So which I still love doing, by the way. Yeah, Thursdays we bro sesh out, so that's always fun. But so yeah, he invited me down. I remember my first workout ever was Helen, and at that point, yeah. And it's funny because like you walk in the door, and the class that I went to was like him and these other guys that he'd been training forever. So they've probably got like a couple of years under their belt of CrossFitting, and I'm like this newbie. But in my mind, I was like, dude, I've been working at LA Fitness. I'm fit. Like I'm gonna crush this with them. But I remember having to scale like almost everything. Like obviously, it's a 400-meter run, 21 kettlebell swings, 12 pull-ups, and it's 3 rounds. So I remember the kettlebell, they wouldn't let me use the 53, so I was using a 35. And then the pull-ups, I didn't know what kipping was, so I could do like 2 strict pull-ups. So everything else was scaled. And I remember going out so hard on the first round. Like I sprinted the 400.
Like everybody doing the first CrossFit class. Just
exactly.
I was gonna say, so that's a good workout too, to like start super hot. You don't know what you're doing. You're like, oh, only 3 rounds. Let's go.
It's a good humbling workout.
And everyone like in class is like, oh yeah, this should be like a 10-minute workout or less. You know, I was like, okay, that makes sense. I don't understand why we're only working out for 10 minutes, but whatever. Yeah. So I remember going out on the 400, coming back in. I was probably like one of the first 2 people in the door, which I'm sure everyone behind me was like, like he's gonna die.
Yeah.
And I did. So I get through the kettlebell swings, I do the pull-ups, and I like just leave the building to go on the second 400, and I'm already like, what's going on? Like my body doesn't feel right. I get down to like the turnaround, and then I'm just like next to a bush, like puking my guts out for I don't even know how long.
Oh gosh.
So they actually had to send somebody out to come find me because I couldn't like get back. I was so traumatized, and I'm just sitting there like on the side of the road, just like hunched over. So one of the coaches comes out later and he's like, "Hey man, you gonna get through this?" And so what should have taken me, 12 minutes or so took me like almost 20.
Dude.
And I remember going home, and my wife Lexi, she was like, "So how'd it go?" And I was like, "I don't know. I threw up a bunch."
Oh my
And she's
God.
like, "So you're never going back?" And I was like, "No, I'm gonna go back tomorrow." And
Yeah.
it's kind of like, like everybody else, you just get hooked on it. So that's like my first experience in like the workout side of things.
It's so addictive. I don't know. Like I remember, I didn't. I mean, I had a similar story that I died in my first work and all that, and
Right.
and then the day after I was like, okay, I'm gonna go, but I don't know what it is. It's just so like, it could be the community, it could be like the type of workouts, like that adrenaline that you get like before the workout. But after, I remember finishing the class and being like, dude, I can't wait to come back, and then just being like obsessed with CrossFit for a couple of years. I still do it. I do it
Yeah.
pretty much every day, but I wouldn't call myself somebody that's like obsessed like I used to be, because now it's just, I see it as like a fun thing. Back in the day, I
Right.
was like trying to go hard, like compete, but
Oh yeah. Well, and I feel like for me it was like a learning curve, right? Like I saw so many things that they were doing that I was like, not only is that just looks cool, but it was like the challenge of like, I can't do that and I've never been taught
for
anything
sure.
like that. So, what's the fastest possible way that I could learn all those skills? And so I spent way too much time, because like as a wedding photographer, most of my stuff was like on the weekends, right? So like Saturday or Sunday was like my primary work time, and then the rest of the week, like you spend 1 or 2 day editing or whatever else like that. But I had a ton of free time during the week, and so literally I just like lived there, which actually led to me being an affiliate owner, because I spent so much time there that eventually my buddy was like, "Hey man, we're expanding and we need to get more coaches." So then it was like they helped me get my level 1, and then I was like, "All right, well I'm going to be here so much, let's just start coaching classes." So
Yeah,
it's kind of like this big long process for the next 2 years of me acquiring new skills, me starting to work on coaching, and then just spending so much time in the gym that it just became like such a huge part of my life. And that's kind of what led into like, hey, they have an entire sport based around this. This is so that was almost 10 years ago. So all of the sponsors for all the athletes were just starting to like start putting money towards stuff. And at first I was dumb. When I first got into it, it was like, oh, I'm going to start calling up athletes and stuff and like try to get them to like do shoots and stuff. And then you realize really fast, like athletes are poor. Like, this is back before any of them made any money at all. And
Yeah.
so you're just like, okay, I can't go to athletes and ask them to get work because they have no money to spend, right? They don't have any money to put out there to get photos or content so that they can use that for advertising. And so then I had to like switch my thinking. Okay, like if they don't have any money, who does have money, right? So then it became like, I'm just going to try to network as much as I can to the people that run the events, and then the people that are the sponsors of the events, or the people that are the sponsors of the athletes. And so that's kind of where I just like started, I would shoot locally at my own box and then at other like local competitions. And then I would just try to network as much as possible with as many
sure.
people as I could meet.
Dude, one of the things I realized is that most people find CrossFit first, and then they kind of apply their photography skills into CrossFit. But
Oh yeah.
Castaños, I think when he started shooting CrossFit, he never did CrossFit before, right? I think he went to the CrossFit Games. I mean, to the first time he worked with Matt HWPO, and I don't think you ever did CrossFit before, right, Castaños?
Yeah, I was like super new. I was like a year in, and I feel like a douche saying it. I was just like, I didn't understand the effect that Matt had on people. Like I didn't
Sure.
realize how important he was to the sport, and like because I saw his credentials, but then like when I really got to meet him and like get in the space, I was like, oh, this is like everyone's like Christ.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
like him and Rich. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like I just didn't realize how valuable and just the effect that he had in the sport, and it felt like it helped me a little bit because
I was
then
gonna say
like,
it probably helped you because you just approach it as a normal gig, and you didn't like exactly like expect like have to really nail this because this dude is
yeah, I
5
definitely
times.
had the jits though. Like I had the jitters like the first time, but it was like because then you understand. Once you understand and you do your research, you're like I was like, oh, but yeah,
Right.
it definitely was like, yeah, I had only been doing it for so long, and then when the opportunity came, I was like, and I was asking my friends, were like, dude, do you understand like what you're doing? I was like,
yeah, right. Yeah.
I think so. And now I do.
Yeah. And Castaños, do you start doing weddings too when you start photography? Is that like the first thing you start doing? Well, I know
Yeah.
you mentioned that you did some like skating stuff, but when it comes to like actually like making as a business, was weddings like kind of pretty much the first thing you did?
Yeah, like early on, like I remember I had started doing I worked for Yelp. So I was doing like just a bunch of events. So out there in Phoenix, like the HQ, so I lived in Phoenix as well. And at the time, the Yelp headquarters was there. So I had known somebody from Yelp. So I was doing just like a bunch of events during the week, like 3 a week. And I'd go out and then I would try to pick up like design clients as well. So I was working for Yelp, doing design clients, like any freelance that I can get. And then, but prior to, so that like professionally, when I was trying to make money, I was doing that when I was doing it freelance. But before that, I was like had working at like a advertising agency. But when I went solo, it was like literally I was trying to scrape anything that I could. But when it
Right.
really started rolling, like, yeah, naturally you like, what makes the money is like portraits, weddings, stuff like that. But I had like a background in advertising. So like I had people that I would like, hey, like anything, like any product stuff. So I'd like go to agencies and such. It's like, it's funny. You just figure out what works for you. But the weddings and stuff are usually the tried and true. You can make money this way. You can, you can get some roots here and then expand out. But yeah, I had a question for you, Imam. Sorry, go ahead, Carla.
No, I was gonna say I still do weddings, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, dude, your weddings are amazing too, dude.
I'm still in that industry.
When I was listening to you, like I'm curious, like how was it like managing? Because like I have a buddy who owns a gym, and I get to see the day to day how gnarly it is and how much attention and care it needs to own like a good gym, and how much. And then Carlos and I can both know how much attention and care and how much time it takes by being a photographer. How was it like? How was it transitioning to managing both things and also like your husband? And then you're a father as well?
Yeah, I got 3 kids.
Oh my God, 3 of them. So what was that? What was that like? And what is it like now from transitioning and then working these 4 jobs and then to now, like, what was that like trying to manage all that? Cause like now, I can't speak for Carlos, but now it's like, I can only imagine trying to put those 2 things and on top of what we have now.
I feel like it's hard taking care of my dogs.
I know, even myself. I'm like, hey, bud, you need a shower. You haven't showered today.
Well, I'm gonna get myself in really big trouble here, but like I feel like having puppies and having kids are very similar as far as like their attention and needs, because like they're very similar for like a long period of time, and then of course like kids get more self-sufficient, so it's a little bit easier that way. But especially when they're super little, it's like the same. Like they all have to get fed the same. They all have to get like you have to take them out to go potty. Like it's just so many things that match. So I totally, when people get new puppies, I'm like, so you just got a kid. That's you literally just had a baby. Yeah. No, it's a good question. I think it's constantly a struggle. I mean, especially when I first started, there was just so many hours you put in, right? Because originally when I first started with CrossFit, I was just a coach and I just, coached a few hours a week. So that was no big deal. And then I got asked to be a partner in that business. And so then it was like, okay, now I'm accepting some responsibilities of like helping the gym run. And at that point I was still doing weddings full time. But like I said, like realistically, that wasn't too bad because it was like the weekends were like when I was shooting. And then the most of the time during the week, I had a lot more extra spare time. And our family was smaller too. That was like, we had Reagan was first and then Lakai was second, kind of in that transition. So we had just had our second kid. And then after that partnership didn't really work out, I started thinking about like, do I have what it takes or do I have any interest in owning my own affiliate, like starting my own community? And when I decided to go in on that, it was like a big process of like, hey, do I have the support of my wife? Like, can we make that work? Am I going to have enough time? And when we decided to go in and do it, it was just kind of one of those things where there was just hours upon hours upon hours where you were just always dedicated to it. And so, of course, like, I give a lot of thanks to my wife that she was willing to support me in that stage of like, I was gone a lot, right? Between I was starting to do stuff where I was traveling, because at that point I was like, I don't want to do weddings anymore, in the sense that like, I'm not going to be like, I shut down my website. I literally rebranded, because before I was ESG photography, which is my initials. And that was like all the weddings and portraits. But because I didn't want to advertise that anymore, I literally just like stopped it. And so I rebranded myself and really just focused on changing my entire career, which was also scary, right? Like I literally got rid of what was my bread and butter for 14 years and just said, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to focus on building my brand for fitness and sports and stuff like that. And so it was a lot of work where, you know, I was gone at the gym a lot, and then I would come home and like see my wife and the kids for a couple hours and then edit, you know, or, you know, work on the next project or send out emails. So it was a really hard balance to the start. And I would say even a little bit now, because originally we got people that came into the gym and helped run that. And of course we have great coaches. And so a lot of times, a lot of that stuff falls on them. And that's been great to like know that every time I leave or I'm at an event, I can trust that like everything's going smoothly. Like most of the time when I go to an event, my phone never rings because there's an issue, right? Like I don't usually have to solve anything. The only time that I had to do that was at Wadapalooza probably 3 years ago, and my phone was just like going off the hook. Like I'm on Bayside stage shooting like in the middle of the sun, and I'm like dying, and I just keep feeling my phone buzz, and I'm like ignoring it. And then I'm like, all right, nobody's going to call me like 6 times in a row. So I finally pick up, I'm on stage, I'm shooting and got my camera in my hand going. And they're like, the internet's not working. We have no music. And I was like, sorry. Because at that point I'm like, what am I supposed to do about it? I'm 2,000 miles away. But yeah, usually when I leave, we've got such great people that I don't really ever worry about what's going to happen because they just make it run smoothly. So it's a much better process now than it was when it first started, for sure.
Dude, that's awesome. I'm just curious because like, I'm lucky enough to understand, because my buddy owns one, how much it takes to do that. And then knowing how much it is. Yeah. And then knowing how much it is to do what we do. It's like, dude, how in the world do you manage that? And it's curious. But like one thing I find common by listening to like Carlos's podcast and listening to like this genre of people that like our community is like the sacrifice that it takes.
Oh yeah.
And people that like, and it's cool to hear, and everybody's just so different. Like we all share that sacrifice that it takes, but everybody's leap is a little bit different.
Yeah.
So
and I think, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I think that, you know, our goal eventually is to ease that down, right? Like have more time to do what we want and have more time to spend with family. And so I think like the biggest goal is, how do I create processes that allow me to eventually get there? And like the hardest thing for us was everything was going really smooth until 2020. And I'm sure that's the same for like most people. And so with all the restrictions and all the things that changed, it kind of like put a lot of us back at the starting line again. Mm-hmm. And it was really hard during going through that, kind of like keeping yourself positive, like telling yourself it's okay to kind of start over. Like, I mean, we lost almost 100 members at the gym. You know what I mean? Whoa. And that's a huge hit financially and a huge hit just mentally. Like, these are all people that, you know, CrossFit's interesting because we're the only fitness situation, generally speaking, that wants people to come in, right? Like, we want people to show up. We want them to engage in the community. And so then all of a sudden you have all these people that are just missing, whether it's, you know, for whatever reason they decided to stop. That's a lot of people that just like aren't in your life anymore either. So it was hard financially, it was hard emotionally. And then telling yourself, I can keep waking up every day and like keep grinding when it felt like you just got planted back at the beginning was not fun. But I think like it was all about like the goals of what we wanted. Like we want Veer to be a place where people can obviously come and get fit and have a good community. And then we also want to make sure that we're changing people's lives in a positive way, no matter what they're getting out of it, whether it's just fitness, whether it's just emotional support, all that stuff really matters to us. And so it was more of like I'm not going to quit, because I feel like so many people have positive aspects of their life that I don't want to just like make that disappear. I don't want to one day wake up and be like, I'm tired of doing it, so now all of you guys have to go find a new home. So it's been a challenge, but it's one of those challenges where you just kind of like, you know, put your head down and keep going.
That's awesome. I think that's one of the things that we learned from just being an entrepreneur, I mean, like owning your own business when it comes to photography too, because same thing happens with photography. Like sometimes like big gigs that you want fall through, and then then you have a month that's like very dry when it comes to like clients, and then you're like, okay, what's happening?
Yeah,
So
no.
it's like it's like did I look like, what am I doing wrong? And then things start picking up. It's just kind of like, not giving up and being like, oh, fuck it, I'm gonna go back and work in an office.
The
uh,
highest highs and like the lowest lows,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And
Oh yeah, all the time.
we have a question here from Enrique. He says, how much have things changed when you rebranded yourself? So I'm guessing from rebranding from a wedding photographer into just kind of like focusing more into the fitness industry.
And I'm not sure if I'm taking this from the right approach, but originally what happened was I was posting like more fitness related content to my Instagram. And I kept getting messages from people that were like, hey, what's the deal with all these like super, like buff people and stuff that you're posting? Like people had gotten confused because my content was like all weddings and happy families and, whatever else. And then all of a sudden I'm like posting people like overhead squatting and snatching and all
It's
this
like,
other
what?
stuff. And I think like my original base of people that were following me at that point just got really confused. And because I kept getting messages about like, hey, what are you doing differently? Are you still doing that stuff? That's when I kind of realized, all right, if I'm going to go, full speed into this, I just have to like kind of start over and rebrand. And so then it was like, all right, what do I want my name to be? And at that point, I was, like you said, I was like so gung ho into everything CrossFit. Like everything CrossFit was life. And at that point, I remember I loved EMOMs, right? EMOMs stand for every minute on the minute. It's a type of workout that we do in CrossFit. And so it was just like my favorite thing. I loved how hard they were. And if they were done right, you were just, ruined, because when you're trying to complete a certain task within a 60-second time and then still try to get rest and then move on to the next minute or whatever, they can be brutal if they're done right. So I just really liked EMOMs. I liked that whole concept where it was still kind of like what mine sounded like. And then I just went with that. So it was just kind of like starting over. I started a new Instagram. I started a new website. And then I just had to kind of get myself out there so that they knew that that's what I was focused on at that point. And it kind of helped. So for a long time, I kept both going. So I still had my Instagram page with all my other stuff. Because of course you're still working. Like even though I shut down my wedding website, it wasn't like I just like cold turkey never did another one, right? So like I still was doing that type of stuff to keep money coming in while I was building the other one in the fitness industry.
What was your name before? Was it just Eric Greenhalgh
It was
Photography?
It was my initials. It was ESG Photography. I
Nice,
think that
nice.
Instagram's still technically there, but I haven't. I
Gotta
don't even.
find
I
it.
haven't logged in it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Somebody
no.
we
find
gotta
it.
find it. Um,
Oh,
that
if you find it, you're gonna see. Remember when everyone was doing like that grid thing, where you would
Yeah.
post like 6 photos? Oh, I did
yeah,
that forever. Like so.
yeah, nice. So that's one of the things that I've been trying to like figure out lately. It's like how I like show myself as a photographer or like content creator to the people, because in reality CrossFit or fitness related stuff, it's like 10% of my business. It's really not that
Right.
much. But I feel like I built my Instagram Bound Media as a fitness page, right?
Right.
Because I started posting like the pictures when I went to 2019 games or like on my affiliate, and people start following. It was mostly because of fitness.
Right.
But sometimes I think I'm like, I mean, Bound Media is actually not a fitness only,
He's so
Right.
good at it. That's what's funny.
business. and and I don't do it much, to be honest. I mean, I shoot competitions. I shoot some local competitions every once in a while. I travel to, I don't know, Louisiana and stuff like that, and I shoot the games, some semifinals. But in reality, I'm doing so many other things, media related,
Right.
that sometimes it doesn't feel right to like show people, okay, yeah, this is Bound Media, and then they just see a bunch of like fitness stuff.
Right.
And sometimes I go back to Castaños, Eric Castaños Instagram, and I really like what he's doing, because he shows himself as an artist more than as a like somebody
Right.
that is specific at something. Like I understand
Right.
where you, like for example, you Imam, like you are a fitness photographer, right? So you want to show like your fitness stuff, your
Right.
lifestyle and all that. But yeah, it's something that I think about it so often. And Eric, I know Casañas, I love what you do with your Instagram. Like
Thanks, man.
you literally like express yourself as like, hey, this is who I am, you know, and that's what I'm
Right.
trying to do. Because at the end of the day, like I feel like just showing pictures from an angle of an athlete that I know is gonna get me likes, that doesn't like, you know, it doesn't like
Yeah.
give me that sense of like, you know, I want people to like to know who am I as a who I am as a person, as a photographer, as an
Right.
artist, more than hey, yeah, I want you to like this athlete. Because at the end of the day, most people don't even care about the photographer; they just want to see the
They want to
you
see the
know
person.
the athlete.
The
Yeah,
person you photograph. Yeah.
Question for you, Imam. Carlos asked me this question when I did this podcast with him, and it was cool because I started thinking about this with other people, and it's like one of my favorite things to learn about people. Like, what were some of your, and this, Carlos, you were probably gonna ask this. What were some of your like biggest influences, and even now, that keep you inspired, or what are some of those things that you do to keep your creativity and your inspiration up? And so like now and then, like what were some of your inspirations and things that inspire you now?
that's a good question.
You asked me, so it's your question.
No, 100%. And you know, the good thing is, well, actually, it's good and bad. Like when I first started, obviously, I was trying to figure out like who are the people that are creating the content for CrossFit. And when I first started that, it was very unknown because like if it wasn't coming from CrossFit itself, it's like there wasn't very much media because they were so controlled back then, right? Like there was like the people that shot for HQ, and then there was like two other people that were really doing it, or you know, whatever. And so originally, like all the content that I was consuming was from CrossFit.com or, you know, eventually the games page. But most of the time they wouldn't even tag their own, you know, media members. It was just like CrossFit Media or something like that. And so then when you start learning who these people are, like Marston and Heber and David Ray and Ginny and, you know, some of the original people that started in that space, then it was easier to like find those people who you gravitated towards. So it's actually very interesting because I still very much feel like I'm kind of like not the new guy in town, but just like I feel like I'm always inspired by the people that I go and work with. You know, I would say probably I try to follow as many creators as I can because I don't like trying to tell myself that I like just want to see one person's work. Because I feel like the majority of us can always be inspired by someone else's perspective, whether it's how they view the story, whether it's how they get their angles, whether it's how they edit. Like sometimes I'll look at photographs and it's not even about the subject, it's not about the thing, it's like the beauty of the edit sometimes like is what inspires me. And so sometimes I'll look at a photo and I'll message somebody and be like, bro, what are you doing in your, you know, Lightroom or post production or whatever that gets you that look? And just for the sake of understanding what their brain was thinking on how they approach that image. So I would say when I first got into it, it was whatever was coming out of CrossFit because that seemed like that was the only thing that there was. And then as I started working more events and meeting new people, I would say that the majority of the people that I follow for either inspiration are kind of those same people. So obviously the Buttery Bros, I love their content. I love what they do. I still follow like Dave Ray, Meg Ellery, actually Charlotte. I love Charlotte's work. She just, I mean, and you look like every time CrossFit's posting something, it's Charlotte. Like Charlotte's tagged in everything. Most of the time, I'm like Charlotte, let somebody else get a photo, right? Like it's like whoever's at CrossFit just has Charlotte's like folder pulled up, and that's all they pull from because it seems like she's getting posted all the time, which is great because she's awesome. So, but I never look at anybody that I've ever worked with as being like lesser or whatever. To me, it's like everyone has a different way to see something and everyone has a different story to tell. And that's what's inspiring to me is just because I view something some way or I shoot a certain way or I want a different angle doesn't mean that theirs is worse or, you know, and some people are in a different learning curve, right? Some people, they're new to the experience. And so you can see the difference between year after year. Like, you see them the first year and you look at their stuff, and then you see them the second year and the third year, and you realize, all right, they're developing their own storytelling as well. And that's what's so inspiring to me is everyone, as they gain experience, their story changes and how they tell that story. So that's what's super fun to me as a creator is seeing how other people view that same experience.
Yeah, no, I
That's awesome.
completely agree, and that's a good answer too, because you mentioned a couple of different things about like people finding their style, and like how like all of us have like completely different styles, and how also CrossFit has changed the style that, I mean, not
Oh
CrossFit
yeah.
specifically, but I'm saying the content creators of in CrossFit, like it's changed completely. I'm sure when you started, or when do you start shooting CrossFit like for the actual brand?
The first time I worked for CrossFit specifically was the 2019 games.
Okay, so that was
That
the
was the
year.
first time that I was hired.
Yeah, that was the year that things started kind of like changing for CrossFit
Yeah.
Media, because it was the year
Yeah.
that they started letting more people to get media
Right.
passes. And
Right.
that's when I feel like there was a wave of like content creators from other like industries or areas
Right.
that they were like, oh, okay, I have this opportunity to shoot this sport, and then kind of like apply their own like art, their own style into CrossFit. And I
Yeah.
mentioned this when I had Castaño's podcast. I say that like his style is very his style, you know, like it's something that you
Right.
see
Oh,
and right
100%.
away you're like, okay, this Eric Castaño's photo. and and I'm sure it took him a while to like get to the point of like, you know, this my style, because I feel like I found my style in CrossFit literally this past year, last year. It's when I was
Okay.
actually like comfortable and be like, okay, this is the style I'm always gonna like follow, this the style that it's me, you know, instead of kind of like trying to figure it out. So it takes a while. And
Oh,
and
100%.
one of the things I ask usually people that have been shooting for CrossFit a lot, I ask Jeannie, um, how do you feel about that new wave of like content creators like applying their own style and just pretty much just changing how like CrossFit media is portrayed to everybody else in social media?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like, I know a lot of the people that got fired from HQ, and like I never want to see anybody get fired from anything, right? Like I would love for everyone to always keep their jobs and things like that. But I really feel like that situation started a lot of what we do now, which is opening it up to different points of view and different voices. And realistically, like almost every other sport, there's not like staff photographers, right? There's like outside media sources that come and cover the events, and that's how they get content. So whether you're working for a stock agency or whether you're working for the team or whether whatever, there's a lot of different viewpoints at that point, and those viewpoints tell the story, right? Whether you work for a news agency or something like that. And CrossFit never had that before. They just had one voice, right? It was like this: if it doesn't come from HQ, it doesn't come from anywhere. And so one, it was hard to get in there because originally there was no access to, right? You had to like beg, borrow, and steal with some major sponsor to even get access to any of the events. And so when all of that happened, it allowed for more voices to come in. And granted, there's always going to be people there who you're going to look over and be like, why are they here? And I think that's the wrong approach, right? We should be encouraging everybody to tell their story because there's plenty to go around. It's the same thing when like owning an affiliate. Like I could have somebody who opens up an affiliate less than a block away because CrossFit doesn't do any like location restrictions, generally speaking, right? They just basically allow people to start their place and then the best kind of rise to the top. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing here is you're always going to see somebody across from you who you have no idea who they are, why they're even there, whatever. And if you focus on that, it's going to make your work suffer. But if you just focus on telling your story and the best you're going to be, then you're not going to ever have to worry about it because the best are always going to find their way up there anyway. And so
True.
to me, it's like, I love it when I see new people because that tells me that like they're developing their skills enough that they got someone to trust them once, right? And maybe they're going to do a crappy job, but that just means they're not going to get hired again. You know what I mean? So instead of me looking at them and being like, oh, I can't believe that somebody else hired them and took money away from one of us, it's like, well, I'm standing there too. So that means that somebody hired me too. And then I'm just going to do my best to make sure that no one's ever going to be like, oh, well, he gave us garbage content, so let's not use him again.
It's
So
such a
my
famine
goal
way
is,
of thinking.
Yeah,
yeah,
I love that
100%.
approach. It's like, you know, you said the best are gonna rise to the top, and that's how it works in every sport too. Like if you think about it in like big sports, I mean, I like soccer, so if you're talking about a forward, you know how many forwards are trying to get that same, you
Right.
know, play on that position, that team. So at the end of the day, you have to see it that way. Like there's gonna be always competition, but like as you said, like the best are always
And
gonna rise.
and competition for most people makes you hungry. Like that's what makes
For
you
sure. Yeah.
focus, because the worst thing you can do as a content creator is show up at an event and tell yourself like, oh, I got this in the bag, like I don't have to try, or I can just do this in my sleep, because that's when your work starts to suffer. It's when you show up every time and you're like, dude, I have to go my absolute hardest, like my best, and do everything that I can to make sure that my content stays good.
Yeah.
And so that's the mentality you should always have. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it.
I approach my gigs with a similar mentality. Like I'm always scared that they're gonna, for example, like now that I'm thinking about Mayhem, right? Like in my mind, I kind of know, like, I'm the photographer they're gonna choose for the event,
Right.
but I'm always like scared that shit, like, it can happen
Yeah.
that, well, first of all, they can hire somebody full time, which I'm expecting at one point they're gonna hire a photographer that's gonna be full time, right?
Right.
Because right now they just have video guys. And second one, it's like if I get a little comfortable at any event, they're gonna notice, right? They're gonna be like,
Right.
hey, Carlos he used to operate at this level, right? Like
Right.
doing this kind of stuff, and now he's getting comfortable at his job,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
now he's not providing what he used to provide. That's
Right.
when you start giving like clues to the client, like, hey, it might be time to move on, right?
Yeah. Make a
So
change. Yeah.
make a change. And every gig that I go with them, or even with any clients, I try to act like it's my first time. I always tell on the
Oh yeah.
podcast, like, approach like a new opportunity as like, this is gonna be the opportunity that can change your career.
Oh yeah.
But in reality, you have to approach every opportunity like that, even if it's not like the first time, because you
Right.
you never know if that opportunity they're giving you again. If you don't take it and like approach it the same way, that's when they're gonna be like, okay, no, this is not what we expecting from this guy. Let's move on to the next one. And I don't know if Castaños, I don't know if you feel similar at that, like that. I know like you're very, very close with I mean, you're the media director at HWPO, but I don't know if you approach with the same idea of like, shit, if I don't do what I usually do, this might be my last year.
Yeah, it's a little it is nerve-wracking. Like I know, like based on, I mean, we talked about it a little bit when we did ours. It's like, well, we have such a big responsibility as far as like being able to having the opportunity to like not only tell the athletes and like the history and the stories of the people that we work for, but also like for ourselves. Like, and it's we give a shit, right? We actually care,
Right.
give a shit, and care how it looks and how it feels, and that's because we're all passionate about it, and that's important. So like for us, it's like essentially second nature. So we do what we have to do in order to be at our best at those things. But because we've all, and I mean, well, I can only speak for myself, like, and I'm curious if you guys felt this way too. Like the reason why we react in a way where we need to feel prepared is because you see and you understand like, oh, I could easily start getting comfortable here. But it's
Oh,
like,
100%.
because we felt that before, we don't want to be that way because we understand and we care so much.
Right.
It's like, okay, how can I get the best of the situation? Because it's a shitty feeling when you're like, like we've all missed a shot or didn't prepare as best as we could. And it's just part of being a human. You're not always on, but when you miss that opportunity where you could have done better, you're like,
Oh yeah.
dang it. Like,
Yeah.
And you feel guilty.
Yeah.
You literally feel guilty. You're like, oh, in the CrossFit space, especially, so many things happen so fast, and you never know where the story is going to come from, because sometimes like the story writes itself right in the moment, right? Like whether somebody does something amazing, like Mal O'Brien winning her first event ever, right? She had an event win. She beat Tia. It was the wall walk and
Thruster.
thruster one.
Mhm.
But like that story didn't exist until it happened, right? So like if you're not ready to always be there to help tell that story, then you're the one that's looking back and being like, I missed that story. I missed that story. And that feeling is awful.
Yeah. And that's part of people's styles too, is like understanding like what's going on too in the day, like
Right.
especially at the games or any event. Like you have to understand like what's on the line, like
Right.
what's like, for lack of a better thing, what's the story of this event, what's going on,
Right.
like who has like like what's going on in this event. So it's like, especially at the games, and I'm glad you said what you said, Imam, because it's just like when you go to, you don't know what's going to happen. So you have to watch it and be on. Like, granted, like the direction, like some rules are established. Like, you know, for me, we all have our athletes that we need to focus on. So it's like, okay, it's a little bit easier in that sense. But moments are huge. Like understanding like our own athletes, like what are their weak points? What is like a big pivotal moment? And like, what are things to look for in that sense? So it's like trying to be keen to those things. And those are the little things that I feel that help us be a little bit better in our space. Like everybody's process is a little bit different, but however you preparing, because even if it feels like redundant, like sometimes I feel dumb, like when I'm writing stuff down, like even in a basic thing, it's like, I never want to take like whatever feels second nature for granted. It's just like, no, let me just write it down real quick. Like, let me just prepare mentally and just to know that like, okay, let's game plan real fast. Like this event, what's going on? They're going to run through here. Like just little things like that. Like that stuff helps so much. But it's like, you could 100%. Tell somebody about it, but you can't really, you could teach it. I think actually you could, but those are the things that I feel like make it the differentiator, but it's all style too, how people go about and do that.
Absolutely. 100%. And going back to being comfortable, like the topic, like the clients, they notice real quick. Like I've been in the position of hiring people for CrossFit events, and you can tell right away when people are starting to get comfortable at their job, and you're like, oh gosh, and it's something that you might not express at the time, but there are so many people are hungry to get the same position. Like just think about for you, Imam, like, or for you too, Eric, like, you know how many people would like, you know what they will give to be, you know, HWPO's media director or to shoot for CrossFit. Like there's hundreds of people out there that are really freaking good, that are working really hard, and they would love to have that position. So if at any point like you get a little comfortable, you know, like the client's gonna notice.
And usually it's not a big issue until they start realizing that like you're missing stuff, right? Like being comfortable is kind of like the hard word, right? Because I feel like the majority of us have done enough events now that when you show up, you don't feel uncomfortable. We're just like very focused and dedicated in knowing that we have a job to do, and our job is to always be ready to capture the moments that need to be there to help tell the story. And that's different at every event too, because sometimes you're shooting like by yourself, and then sometimes you're shooting with a team. And that, you know, that changes your priorities too, because one of the first times I ever shot in a team environment was at Wodapalooza. And being told to like, hey, you're going to be on this stage for 4 hours, and you're going to be on one side of that stage, and trying to stay like, keep things interesting and shoot new perspectives and not just get so bored out of your mind that you're going to like, you know, shoot the exact same shot every time. And so that was very interesting learning curve too, is like, my job is not always to catch all of the moments that are center stage. My job is to try to make something interesting out of the place that I've been placed, right? Because at Wodapalooza, when you're shooting on their team, you might be stuck on one corner of one stage for hours at a time. And if you're not good enough at paying attention to the side stories, right? Like maybe there's a coach hugging their athlete, or maybe there's someone who's having a hard time and like the crowd's picking them up. And so you get crap. Like there's so many stories to tell if you're not always just focused on the center stage when you're in a team environment. Of course, if you're not and you're by yourself and your job is to tell like the main story, then you have to put yourself in position to get that story.
Yeah, and that's also so important, being a team player, especially in this in our industry, because I mean, I've had the opportunity to shoot in teams too. In fact, like I was on a team with Imam at the beginning of the year when we shot the Fittest Experience in Texas.
Oh, sick!
Yeah,
and that
was so much fun.
Yeah, so much fun. And that's another thing. Like when I approach that kind of like gigs that I know I'm with a team, like one of my priorities is to be a good teammate, because you can be the best photographer, but dude, if you are one of those
nobody
guys
likes
that,
you,
like, you know, for a fact that they're gonna talk to Nicole and they're gonna be like, hey Nicole, you know, like Carlos is good, but dude is a dick. Like I cannot shoot with him again. And you can be the best photographer forever, but you're not coming back next year, right? So it's just so important to like just, you know, be a person that people can like relate to and that they feel comfortable around you. That's like, 100%. You know, Yeah.
One of my number one rules whenever I'm either working with somebody new or whatever, and I legitimately think this through my head, is like, how do I make them love me? And as weird as that sounds, like I don't need their love to feel like, whole or anything, because I have my family and I have my friends. But when I go to an environment where I either don't know people or I'm working for someone for the first time, my goal is to walk away as if they're my best friend. And that's, just from like a personal standpoint, I want them, even if I don't produce the most amazing work they've ever seen. And like, obviously that's a goal too, but I want them to walk away with a good experience of like who I am as a person too. So
Yeah.
I always think that every time meeting somebody or working with somebody new, it's like, make them love me.
Yeah.
As weird as that sounds.
No, it makes sense. And we all remember what it was like to do like one of your first big events. Like it's nerve wracking. You don't know
Oh yeah.
what you should be doing, what you like, and so it's difficult unless you have like, unless you trust your gut and you prepared, or you have like a really good mentor to
Yeah.
lead you, and in that way, you can find your own way in the space. But it's nerve wracking.
And it
Like,
helps. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say it helps tremendously too whenever somebody's like new in the air and like in the industry, and somebody like, for example, like you, Eric, and you're like very welcoming, like, hey, like if you have any questions, just let me know. It just helps a lot to people who are new, because they're gonna, they probably already look up to you, to your work. And if they already feel comfortable working with you whenever they're, new at that specific job, they're gonna be like,
Yeah.
okay, like that just gives them a lot of confidence. And people notice too.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
For Beach Bro, that it's one of the competitions that I'm a media director. I have to like hire people. I've
Yeah.
had people on my team just for the specific reason that I know. Well, first of all, they're good at their job, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Are they the best? For some people, it might be. They're good. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way. But the reason that they are so good at being a team player, at being
Right.
nice to the athletes, to the judges, to the
Right.
owners. They follow instructions. Just those three
Right.
facts, like just
Yeah.
being a good team player, being nice to people, and following instructions. That's the main reason why I have my team.
Right.
You know,
And
like
that's like
being a talented photographer, like that helps you get there, because nobody that
Right.
joins a team like that, it's gonna be, like a crappy photographer. But
Right.
what's gonna make you stay on that team and like, stay with me, it's gonna be just being like that. I mean, I don't care who you are. You can be,
Yeah.
Peter McKinnon. If you shoot that competition with me and you're being a dick to Eric, like, dude, like, get out of my way, stuff like that,
Yeah.
you're out.
Yeah, and it's much more
Right.
about the way you do things, like your attitude.
Right.
It's the way you do stuff, and
Of course.
that's everything over shooting.
Oh yeah, 100%. Well, and it's like at a certain level, everyone is good, right? So if
Mhm.
everyone is good and the determining factor is this guy's a pain to work with and this guy isn't, or gal, when I say
Exactly.
guy, I just mean everybody. Um,
Just dudes.
if that's the difference of factor, then the person who's obviously a good team player and going to be part of what makes it special, that's going to be the person that gets hired. Because at a
For
certain
sure.
point, everyone's kind of at that same, like you're gonna produce
Yeah.
good content. So then it comes down to personality. It comes down to the relationships you have, and that you're a good team player for sure.
Especially in this
Absolutely.
industry, because everybody is good. So it's much
Right.
more about
Oh,
more
100%.
about what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a question, Carlos. That's cool.
Yeah. Let me go through the comments real quick.
Oh yeah,
We
got
have
questions.
Charles McCoy, Carlito. He says, "Hi, Eric, dude. What a great guy. I love him."
He is a great guy.
Jordan Levin. He was actually at TFX with us.
Sick.
Yeah.
What a
What's
Jordan.
up, Jordan?
Super good guy. Talk
We
about
have
good attitude.
Will. Will is the graphic designer for the Sevan podcast. Great guy too.
Is he asking? Is that a question?
No, he's
Oh,
just
how
saying
is that
like, yeah, like photographers aren't good team players.
Oh,
Like,
he's saying
everything else.
no,
Like
no,
that,
yeah.
that's the worst it can happen. Enrique
Gotcha.
says, this is for Eric. I remember TFX. I say bye. You gave me a hug and told me, bros hug. Have a good trip. And that stuck with me.
Bros hug. That's
There
a
you
good
go.
hug.
And
I'm a hugger. Oh yeah,
yeah,
I hug.
Charles says, facts. Always be nice and a team player. We're trying to do our best and have a great time. That's true.
100%.
And let me go through this question,
Dude, hit it.
Yep.
Castaños, and then you can ask your question.
No, dude. No
So
worries.
Enrique asks, what's the thing you wish you've learned earlier in your photo career?
That's awesome.
I think what I wished I learned earlier was that everyone has a place. I think when I first started, it didn't matter what industry it was. When I first started as a wedding photographer and everything, I always saw everyone, at the very beginning at least, I saw everyone as like competition, but in a bad way. So instead of using that as like fuel to like hone my skills and just do better at every possible aspect of it, I always saw that as like a negative. I always saw competition as being like they're taking from me. And so I think what I wish I would have learned earlier is that there's so much out there, and you don't have to be afraid of other people doing their thing. In fact, we should be encouraging other people to do their thing, because everyone does better when we're engaged in making each other better. And that's really where competition is helpful. If you embrace that concept of, I just always have to be on my A game in order to produce the best content possible. And everyone, there's so much to go around that we shouldn't be worried about other people. We should just be focused on doing our best. And that's what I wish I learned earlier.
Dude, great answer.
That was wicked.
Yep. Castaños, you had a question for Imam.
Yeah, mine was like actually kind of similar to what you were saying. I was just listening to you talk. Like early on, I think it's hard for at any point, but especially early on, it's like hard to find your way creatively in like what you
Right.
do. From your perspective, what do you think is like some of the most beneficial things you can do, not only as like a photographer, but as a creative?
I think the one thing that helps me the most is having something to do that has nothing to do with what you do.
That's awesome.
And what I mean by that is, I love creating in the fitness and event space, but I also love shooting stuff that has nothing to do with that.
Mhm.
And I think what that does, it gets me out of the normal headspace that I'm in when I'm at those events, and allows me to kind of create different things that allows my brain to work better in the future. So I love macro photography. I love taking small inanimate objects and trying to create something beautiful out of them. And so I try to put that into like my free time when I can, because it changes with the way my brain thinks, right? It's a completely different focus, because I can spend all the time that I want on creating that one shot, as opposed to having to be ready at all times for a moment that could be gone in a millisecond. And so having something that can kind of break the normal cycle of what you do really helps me to be a better creator in general, because it helps me hone different skills and be ready to kind of apply those into what I do, as a job.
That's awesome, because then you can mesh these two different worlds that didn't
Right.
exist before. Well,
Right.
that for you, and then I feel like that's exactly, and then that example is how you develop styles. Is you
Yep.
combine
Right.
all these different interests, and then you come with your perspective.
Yeah, and that goes back
And
to
it just,
sorry, I was gonna say that goes back to what I was saying, like 2019. So many creators from like, travel photographers or like different
Right.
stuff just came into CrossFit, and then this new style of CrossFit photography just
Right.
was born. It's because mashing different
Right.
things into CrossFit.
I think it helps you just not burn out too.
Mhm.
True.
I think so many times, like
Very true.
creatives, like think about it in so many different ways. Some people see like photography and videography and things like that as like something they do as a side gig, right? So like it's kind of like their release. It's what they do for fun. Whereas like this is our full-time job. And so I have to figure out how to like keep that fresh and interesting for me, so that way I don't just get burnt out doing the same thing over and over again. So having that it's still in the content creation space, because it's still me being creative, but it's being creative in something completely different. So it allows me to kind of break that day-to-day cycle of what we do as a living.
That was such a
Yep.
cool answer. I love
Yep.
that answer.
Yep. So, we have Jordan 11. He's asking, well, first of all, Jordan got a gig to go to the games for the first time. So
Let's go,
congratulations,
Jay.
Jordan.
Congrats, Jordan.
He messaged me the other day saying the podcast and the people have been on the podcast has helped him a lot into, how to like reach out to people and like how to get to that goal of his that was the go to the games this year. So he asked Imam, biggest advice for someone going to the games for the first time this year. And I guess Castaños, you can also kind of like give him your advice.
My advice would be just to work harder than anybody else there. And that's hard to say because everyone's working hard, but do the extra stuff. Take smaller breaks. Everyone needs to eat, hydrate, all that type of stuff. But just make sure that you're always ready. And then the second thing I would be is develop those relationships. So we were talking about earlier, like being a good team player, you know, making sure people remember you. And the majority of that is building those relationships. So it's very common for me when I've got free time or I'm walk into a booth. Like maybe it's a company that you want to work with later and you need to meet people. So you need to meet the people who are running the booth, maybe the owners there. At the games especially, everyone who's anybody is going to be there. So all of the people who make decisions, whether it's a media director, whether it's the owner of the company, whatever, they're all usually there at some point during the game. So go meet people, go say hi, tell them who you are. Don't get pushy, right? Don't sit there and be like, oh, can I work for you or get a job? Just say hi, tell them who you are, create a normal relationship. And that's what leads to eventually having opportunities in the future, is just meeting as many people as you can and trying to build those relationships from a networking standpoint, not just like, oh, here's what I am, please hire me. Like, don't even ask, just go there, create a natural relationship, tell them who you are and what you do, and that'll eventually work into other opportunities in the future.
Yeah.
Awesome. I was looking for a text that I got from one of my friends one time. That really helped me a lot. The first time I got a good opportunity, he said, "All it takes is one opportunity or one break to change your career. Let this weekend be it for you."
That's awesome.
You know,
That's so cool.
that's all it
great.
takes.
Yeah.
It only takes, you already got the opportunity of going to the games. It only takes that one opportunity to completely change your career. You know, and like you gotta approach it that way. Like this could be the weekend that's gonna change.
And be ready to say yes. So it's actually very interesting, and I'm gonna steer us here anyway. I don't know if you were gonna bring it up or not, but
Let's go, dude.
I actually wasn't hired to shoot for Dave. So when I showed up at the CrossFit Games, I was working for Matt. His last name just literally Bishel. Matt Bishel from HQ. I was there going to be covering like everything that was at the games that wasn't the game. So we were doing affiliate lounge and the spectator workout area. Like we were basically telling the story of everybody else that wasn't CrossFit competition specific.
Oh, that's fun.
Yes, I was still shooting some competition floor, but really it was like the experience of the games, not the actual competition itself. So that's what I was hired to go to. For some reason, whoever they had to come do that, it just wasn't working out. And I have no idea the answer to why. All I know is I got pulled aside on like Tuesday of that week, and they were like, hey, just chill here for a second. And I remember sitting in the media room being like, am I in trouble? Like, what's going on? I really don't have a lot of idea of like what's going on. And then Matt comes over to me and he's like, hey, walk with me. And we're like walking over and he's like, hey, whatever's going on isn't really working out. I'm putting you on Dave's team for the rest of the week. So like, I'm just walking over getting told that I'm now going to be Dave's like personal photographer for the rest of the games. And I'm sitting there like, oh, okay. So like, imagine trying to get your mental space right of like, not only am I have a completely different assignment than what I expected, but now I have to literally tell the story from Dave's perspective. And it's funny because Matt's just like this. He like walked me to the door of the war room, and there's like Christine who does all the copy. Like she's the one that writes all the captions. She's amazing, by the way. And there's Dave and there's like two other people in this room. And he's like, hey guys, this is Eric. And he just like pushes me in the room and then he walks away. So like, that was my entire introduction to like everybody on the team was like, this is Eric. And then he just shoves me in and then he like walks away pretty much. And it's funny because I had no idea what we were doing. Like I knew that they were telling the story from Dave's perspective, but I had never even followed that myself. So I didn't know like what type of stuff we were looking for. I didn't know what stories we were trying to tell. And I tell you what, like if it wasn't for the fact that Christine is so good at her job, the first day would have been a complete nightmare because I really was in a very uncomfortable position. But I just had to go back to what I knew. Like I just knew that like I'm here to tell a story. So I'm going to talk to Christine, get the idea of the story I want to tell, and then try to create an image that tells that story or helps tell that story. And so I think the big thing too is when you get those opportunities, because like I wasn't hired to do that originally. And so it was kind of like I got thrown into the fire. But that's kind of where things happen right in your life. Like sometimes opportunities just show up on your doorstep and you could just like shrink away and be like, oh, that's too much. I can't do it. or you can just walk into it, right? Walk into it, do your best, and then whatever happens, happens. So that was an opportunity that I didn't think I would ever have. And, I'm grateful that I was given that opportunity. But realistically, when those opportunities come to you as a creator, you have to just walk in, right? Walk into the fire and then go at it and work hard.
Great answer. I mean,
I
that's
love that.
exactly
Was
how
cool.
you should approach it. Castaños, do you have any advice for Jordan? How to approach?
Yeah, it's really more add-ons. Like everything you guys said was really cool. I know, like, I was just thinking of my own experience. Like the preparation, like you guys have both spoke on, is like so important. And it's like, even if it seems like something so micro, but just running through game plans in your heads, like for whatever works for you, whether if that's the day of, before you get out there, every event, whatever works for you, but making sure you're prepared and having some sort of game plan and understanding, like situationally, like if this happens, maybe this, and whatever works for you, but just preparing. And honestly, I heard Matt say this like a couple of times, and it stuck with me a lot, and I like it. But he talks about like running your own race, and I really like that, because and it's doing what got you to the dance. And
Right.
like you were saying earlier, it's like you're there for a reason. You're good enough to be there. So
Right.
and it's easy, especially when you're out there. You look left and right. You see Carlos, you see Imam. You're like, shit, and then you can get so caught up in trying to do something else, because by being surrounded by all these people that are so good. But just do what got you to the dance and run your own race. And I feel like that is one of the things that I can just add based on that. I feel like they can help, but because
100%.
like I said, it's so easy to get caught up in other people's
Yeah.
shit while you're out there.
And I would say also don't get discouraged by any type of like mistakes that you make at the beginning, or like if you
Yeah.
if you
Because
look
you
at
will, you
yeah,
will, and a lot of
if you go back to one like the first event and you see the photos and you really didn't like the angle, or like I don't know, like the way you exposed it, like that's okay, you know. Like
Right.
I've shot countless events that I go back to photos, I'm like, oh gosh, like
dang
no,
it. Yeah,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
you
this
should
is not
sit.
good.
You
So
should
yeah,
sit in that for a little bit too.
just
It
know
helps.
that it's normal. It's normal to mess up some shots, to miss good shots too. Like, but just be prepared for the next one. You know, like like we always
100%.
say on that podcast, like you learn more from failures than anything else. Just
Oh yeah.
take that that as an experience and just apply it and make sure it doesn't happen again. Just the only thing I will say, do not make a mistake, is do not forget batteries.
Yeah.
Don't forget your memory
Yeah.
cards. Make sure that's already like
Back
spot
up your
on.
Right.
stuff.
Yeah, but yeah,
Oh, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Make sure,
Dump your cards and put it on
yeah,
a hard drive.
and make sure, yeah. I always try to bring 2 SSDs just to like back up the backup, like just in case. I'm always like super scared and all that.
Dude.
But boys, we've been on for 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 19 seconds exactly. It's been really fun.
Dude, we could do this all day. Let's
Heck
just
yeah.
keep talking.
Yeah, I will keep talking, but I know you both are busy guys. But dude, Eric, thank you so much for both Erics, but
thank
specifically
you for having
Imam,
me
because you're the man of the hour right now. Yeah. So thank you so much
appreciate
for being on the show. Like it was really, really fun. I'm glad you were able to share some of your experiences. You've been shooting for 18 years, so you're one of those guys that we really want to pay attention to and like, absorb as much information as we can, because we can only learn, from somebody like you. But thank you so much. And
welcome.
before
you.
we go, what's next for Imam Photography?
I will be at the games. My role is kind of, I'm not allowed to talk about it yet, so to speak. But I will be there. So if you're at the games and you're even a new person, come say hi. I love to meet as many people as possible, but that's what's next for me.
Yeah, don't get his beautiful eyes and the mohawk scare you. He's a great.
I'm getting a haircut next week because this is getting a little out of control. But
shorter, or you're losing the mohawk?
No, it's gonna be just like all freshed up, and then I'm not sure if I'm keeping the full mullet or not. So we'll see what happens. But
yes,
come and see what the haircut is for the game.
You have to. That's our plan.
You should go full DB and just dye it pink.
Castaños, thank you very much for co-hosting. We're gonna try to make this more often. That Castaños is gonna be co-hosting some of the episodes.
That's awesome.
I think it brings a little more of a different vibe and energy, and also different questions that I wouldn't ask. So thank you so much, Eric. Anything else you want to add on to? I'm talking to Imam. Imam, anything else you want to add on to anybody that's been listening to the podcast or that are gonna listen?
I think the last thing I would leave you with is always be willing to accept criticism from those people around you that you trust. One of the best thing that ever happened to me was I was actually trying to get on Wadapalooza's team for a couple of years before I ever made it. And Ty Randall was always in charge, and he still is, I think. And I remember like I just wasn't getting much response. And I finally just straight up, I was like, hey, what am I doing that I need? Like, what am I doing wrong? Or what am I doing that I need to get better at? And he straight up sent me a list, like, I don't even know how a mile long, of like
That's
ways
awesome.
to improve fitness. And I could have taken that one of two ways, right? I've been super, butthurt about it, whatever. But I just literally looked down that list and I went back and looked at my images and I was like, dude, he's 100% right. I'm missing these moments, or I'm like half, whatever I was doing was not what was going to get me to where I was. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me, was taking that criticism and then getting better. So if you have people that you trust, get someone that's going to be honest with you and critique you, and then try to get better from there.
There he goes. Knowledge bomb by Eric Greenhalgh. Thank you so much, guys. Everybody that's
thank
listening, thank you so much. Make sure you like, subscribe, do whatever you
thing.
can
Do the
to
thing.
do the thing.
Do the
Yeah.
thing. Do the
If you
thing,
want to
you're-
follow Eric Greenhalgh, make sure you go to his Instagram at Imam Photo. So EMOM Photo. If you want to follow Eric, it's at Eric Castaños, but after Eric, there's an underscore. And you don't have to follow me. I'm not the important one here. Just
You
them
should follow
too.
Carlos.
Follow them too. All right. Thanks,
I love
everybody
following you.
that's listening and supporting. I really appreciate it. See you
All right,
next
thanks, guys.
week.